And so with that, if I can begin to walk through our budget request. The CCRI team stands ready to work with the General Assembly to support a viable budget that ensures the college stays true to its mission, to provide all our students with high quality education and help train Rhode Islanders to get back to work. It is through this lens which we developed our budget request. And it is a budget that is based on the real cost to run our institution, invest in our employees, and accounts for the services and instruction each student requires. As you can see, our total unrestricted operating budget request for FY22 is $114 million. That is a reduction of $13.3 million from the FY21 enacted budget. And what you can see there is it includes $55.5 million in tuition and fees. That represents a $3.4 million decrease from last year. And then $52.4 million in state appropriation, which represents, as the chair noted, just under $200,000 increase, $168,000 increase over FY21. And finally, just under $5 million in revenues from our Division of Workforce Partnerships, $4.9 million. So if I can turn to our tuition and fees, our council, the post-secondary council, approved a 2.5% increase in tuition and fee rates. That brings our annual cost for full-time students, as you can see in that column, to $4,980. For a full-time student, that is an increase of $120. That increase puts us directly in line with the most recent HEPI index, the Higher Education Price Index. As you can see, it keeps CCRI's tuition well below the Pell level of $6,400, and I might be in the way here. Can you? Am I? Yeah. Is that better? I hope someone can hear me. Okay, good. $6,495. So it's just $1,515 below. And as you can see, maintains the college's position in New England as the third lowest. I'll move on to a very brief overview of our RYCAP request. Included in the governor's budget for this coming year, which is where I'll focus, so FY22 is just over $10 million. That funding is going to support the ongoing renovations to our lab and classroom spaces at our two oldest campuses, the Knight campus in Warwick and the Flanagan campus in Lincoln, and to continue the work that you can see there to improve our connectivity throughout the college. That's a big ticket, that data cabling and power infrastructure, and we're spreading it out over this period that you can see right in front of you. This is an important investment in our college. I want to thank this committee and the General Assembly for its past support of RYCAP funding that has allowed us to continue to improve our learning spaces. Finally, one last slide, which is what I discussed with you all. We hoped it might be helpful to share what we have received and what we expect to receive from Washington with federal relief. Obviously, this is not included in the governor's budget proposal, but we hoped it would be helpful for this committee. As you can see, the initial CARES Act, CARES 1, was enacted last May, a year ago, based, of course, on the number of Pell students that you serve. CCRI was awarded $10.4 million, half of which went immediately into our students' pocket, overseen by our financial aid office for direct student aid. And then an additional $5.4 million for expenses directly tied to the pandemic. You can see then the second CARES Act was enacted this January. That awarded $22 million to CCRI. That reflects, as you can see, an additional $5 million for direct student aid, and then 17 to cover any costs associated with significant changes to the delivery of instruction due to the coronavirus and other institutional expenses. We anticipate using the majority of the funds provided under this portion of the two CARES Acts to prepare our buildings, our technology, and our people for a return to a majority in-person model in the fall. We will continue to retrofit classrooms to enhance online and hybrid learning, provide our people with PPE, and invest in technology and professional development for our faculty and staff. And then finally, ARP, the American Rescue Plan Act, was passed by Congress just this March. We believe CCRI will be awarded just north of $38 million, $19 million of which will be once again allocated for direct student aid. We await guidance from the U.S. Department of Education on how the college may use those institutional funds, but based on preliminary guidance, we believe it will be similar to the regulations of CARES 1 and CARES 2. So in closing, the college is deeply grateful to the General Assembly for the support it receives to execute our primary mission to provide high quality educational and workforce training opportunities for Rhode Islanders. We are grateful to all of you and to all Rhode Islanders for your belief in our students and in our college. Our college is committed to driving strong, successful outcomes, and we are asking for your support. Thank you all very much for your time this evening. Our CFO and Vice President of Finance, Dr. Alberton, and I are on the line and available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, President Hughes, and thanks for the overview. One thing I did want to ask, I know in January there was the governor's emergency, I forget exactly what it's called, emergency fund, GEER funds, et cetera, that were sort of at the discretion of the governor. I know that the governor had made a supplemental sort of appropriation to CCRI of about $5 million, if my memory is correct, around helping students get back on track and from a financial aid perspective. Can you just briefly touch on that as to if we already have promise, right, you know, and help us understand the connect around where that was used and why that was needed?
Absolutely. So thank you, Chair. The two scholarships that I discussed at length, that is the GEER funding. So the first, which was for adult learners who were at least halfway towards a certificate or degree, but had stopped out of college, had not been enrolled at any college over the last year. That is where some of that $5 million has been invested. And then the remainder was for what we think of as the promise scholarship for those 3,000 high school seniors that graduated in 20 that did not enroll in post-secondary education.
Okay. And maybe this might be for Commissioner Gilkey and maybe Joe in the budget office. When those decisions were made, I guess I certainly understand the need at CCRI, but I was kind of surprised when both URI or Rick didn't also, you know, have a similar need. I mean, I hear from particularly Rick students in my district more where the financial aid budgets at Rick have been really strained down, and I could imagine we probably had some similar issues with students having issues continuing to pay tuition at Rhode Island College as much as CCRI or anywhere else.
Sure, Chairman, if I may. The GEER funds, I do understand that they were used not just for higher education, but for K-12 as well. So that, yes, some of them were used to fund initiatives at CCRI and through the Office of the Post-Secondary Commissioner, but other funds, if I recall, were used to fund some pre-K initiatives and mental health services for students as well. So not only was the governor deciding between the various institutions of higher education, but also among K-12 needs as well.
Yeah, I guess just on that point though, right? I mean, I think looking at between K-12 and higher ed, and yeah, I think there was like $2.5 million on pre-K, which I get it. I don't know. It seems that we have an understanding that same need would have been at more institutions than just CCRI, and I don't know. I guess I just don't get it. But I guess that's why we're back, and we'll be managing the appropriation process. I know Senator Cano has a question.
Thank you so much, Chairman, and thank you, President, for the overview. Really appreciate it. I wanted to just recap what you said about the 122 positions that were part-time that you had a layoff based on the cuts that you needed to do. So are you already a full positive? You already hired the 122 positions back, or like what is the number, or what are you thinking?
Yep, so we have not, in a significant way, restored those positions. We are, just very recently, we've brought back the union employees that are full-time employees, and the nature of our bargaining agreements is that we need to move first with our unionized employees who are full-time employees, and then look at where we are financially to think about what we can afford to bring back in terms of our part-time workers. It is a significant part of our workforce, and I know that the college is feeling that loss, and we hope that we will be in a position once the FY22 budget is completed to look carefully, person by person, role by role, to see what we can afford to bring back.
So thank you for that explanation. And just like I did ask President Sanchez, I would ask the same to you. So based on the proposed budget that you submitted to the governor's office, and the one that it was submitted for us to review, what would be the impact on the students and the staff that you currently have if we don't reinstate the proposed budget that you initially thought of?
Sure. So thank you for the question. I would say so much of what President Sanchez shared, I would reiterate. And so rather than reiterating, I think I would offer the following observations. Just as President Sanchez shared, and I think others of you advanced, Rhode Island, like many other states, but in fact at a more accelerated level, has pretty dramatically changed the ratio between tuition dollars and state appropriation dollars. Now, in our case, we're a younger institution. We're in our 50s. When we started, state appropriation covered well north of 50%. Something close to like 80%. So certainly year over year, decade after decade, we've seen that ratio change. The most significant hit that we took, like virtually every other higher education institution in the country, was of course the Great Recession back in 2008 and 2009. We really haven't recovered from that. We've seen in my time at the college either level funding or cuts. And so to answer your question, specifically, I think I would observe the following. We're going to go after every single thing that's within our power to manage. And that means, it's our responsibility to try to bring as many Rhode Islanders back through the doors and create healthy enrollment, healthy tuition dollars that for sure are going to be a permanent and important part of how we run the college and manage it financially. I think in the very near term, used effectively, the federal dollars will be what I think of as a stopgap measure. I think week after week, month after month, as we actually see them unfold and we get increasing guidance from the U.S. Department of Education, we're going to learn, our CFO and our team, what are we actually permitted to put these federal dollars to? And again, my opening comments, I think we're in this for between 18 months and 2 years before, as a community college, we're back to where we might have been in the fall of 2019. So while I have immediate concerns about this year's state appropriation and very real concerns about sort of our ability to be flexible in how we provide adequate support of our students and adequate support and investment in our people, our faculty and staff. I look out 2-3 years, and I think unless and until as a state, we agree, as I've heard so many of you on this committee, that the value of investing in higher education is real. We will face ongoing concerns. Here's what I know, and I know you know it too, you visit our college. Our students have so much intelligence, so much possibility, all the grit you need, and they're arriving and they're needing significant support. We need to meet them where they are. I know they have the brain, I know they have the drive, but what they absolutely require is significant investment in making sure that when they come into our college classroom, they have what they need to be successful learners. So I know you understand that. I think here's what I'll say, as a Rhode Islander, I recognize that all of you, you face really difficult decisions. about where you're going to fund. As a college president, and I know our students and I see what they mean for the future of Rhode Island, I certainly hope we will see a move this year and in the ensuing years where the entire legislature understands the importance of actually investing in higher education. The data that was shared before I delivered my remarks, RYPEC is a nonpartisan institution. When they share how we stack up relative to the rest of the country, that's sobering. As a Rhode Islander, I don't want to be in the bottom 5. I want to see us really investing where we believe our future lies.
Thank you, President. I really appreciate, while I understand your leadership on working with any budget that we pass, I bring the concerns that we really need to be very intentional about accelerating, our investment into higher education, specifically because of what you say. They say appropriation since the recession in 2008 has been declining, or it hasn't been what it used to be, and the need, I feel that it is greater now than it was then, especially after a pandemic and the diverse populations that you do serve. So I just want to say I commend you and your staff for everything that you guys do, but again, I bring concerns to that gap, and I really hope that investment could be reinstated. I do know that there is a lot of need right now, but education is certainly something that we shouldn't be continue defunding at the state appropriation level. So I just want to say, I share your concerns, and just like I say to President Sanchez, I do believe that the ones that really pay for that lack of investment from the state is really those families of color and that are in need, and that is what is going to deter them from attending college because of that tuition increase, or even for our families that had the employment before, if they don't have the same level of support with the staff members, then it's also a deter. It will deter them from the outcomes that they probably would have if they had the support, mentors, and the staff members to help them, with their education goals. So I just want to say thank you, and that's it for me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Senator Cano. Senator Felag.
Thank you very much, and congratulations. President Ruggiero's bill passed in the House 68-5, I believe, and so it's now on to the governor for approval. But I think we had this conversation last year where the number of individuals that are in this Rhode Island Promise program had declined. Do you still see that decline? And I guess my question back then would be my same question now is, what sort of outreach have we done in terms of trying to identify those students that could be potential high school students that could be potentially students at CCRI? Have we reached out to the urban guidance counselors or any other individuals to try to promote this program?
Thank you for your question, Senator Felag, and you're right. So the highest enrollment that we saw with Rhode Island Promise was our pre-pandemic fall. So that would be the fall of 2019. We enrolled 2,599 students that year. And just as a reminder to the committee, to be a Rhode Island Promise student, you need to enroll for full time, and you need to enroll the September after you graduate from high school or earn your GED. And so to put that in perspective, prior to the launch of the Rhode Island Promise Scholarship, if we look at that cohort, so the cohort of graduating seniors who enroll in college for the first time, full time, we enrolled 1,100 students. The fall before Promise was launched. And so when you get to that number of 2,599, we can all see that's more than doubling our enrollment. You're right, we did see a decline this fall, and it was a decline analogous to that 7.4% that we saw across the entire college. I'm going to tell you the one number I don't have memorized is what that fall number was, but what I do know is even with that decline, so let's call it, it's the fall of 2020, it is still more than double what we were pre-promised. So what we anticipate, and as we look at our budget for promise in the out years, we do anticipate a stabilization. If we use just that number of 2,600, and we look then also at rough numbers, the number of high school seniors graduating from Rhode Island every year, it's roughly 10,000 students. So certainly our team's mission is to recover the numbers that we lost to COVID, get us back up, as quickly as we possibly can to that nearly 2,600 number. And again, I do want to be realistic. It's going to take our students and their families some time to really come back. So finally, as I shared earlier, that GEER funding, a significant part of that money is going to those Promise students in 20 who would otherwise, we hope, have been a significant part of the Promise class. We are making those dollars available to them to enroll this fall. And then finally, your very good point about are we being intentional in how we think about our outreach? Absolutely, 100%. We're working with all of the high schools, really promoting and driving the availability of those scholarships. We are thrilled that with the progress Rhode Island is making with COVID rates and with the increasing vaccination. We're going to hold for the first time in over a year in-person, one-stop enrollment days. We know for our students and their families, it feels much more approachable if you can come and talk to a real person and see what the building looks like and meet our incredible faculty and advisors. We also have an ambition to have those pop-up vaccine clinics so that students and their families as they're coming our goal is to have them fill out a FAFSA, enroll for classes, get their vaccine, and get ready to enroll with us this fall. So we know it's a tall order, but I can assure you that our enrollment team and the entire college is strongly focused on getting those students and getting them into our front door.
Yeah, because, as I mentioned, one of the issues could be as simple as filling out the FAFSA form, because obviously that's the requirement of the Rhode Island Promise program, and maybe certain individuals aren't familiar with filling that out, and I don't know if the guidance counselors provide that assistance or CCRI provides that assistance or a combination, but it's imperative that these children, high school graduates, see a pathway for them. And so, as you mentioned, you said you had 4 different campuses and you probably have around 20,000 students. What is the breakup of those campuses, and are they criteria based, or
Sure.
do you all offer evening classes or morning classes, daytime? How's the breakup?
Absolutely. And I just want to go back one more time to the FAFSA. We understand the fundamental importance of making it easy for our students to do that. We absolutely have support staff that will sit down with an individual, with a student, with the student's family, to walk them through that process. We are encouraged that our partners, both at RIDE and at the Office of the Post-Secondary Commissioner, understand the importance of that. We don't ever want it to be a barrier. And I know that Commissioner Gilkey is focused on really thinking about how, with even more intention, higher education can work directly with municipalities. So we are excited to support that work and to send our resources there. You asked about our campuses, and we will come back to you with exact numbers, but high level, the building behind me, the 300,000 square foot building in Warwick, of course, that's our biggest campus. We serve just north of 7,000 students there, typically. Lincoln is our next biggest, and I'm going to need someone to help me start doing this math, but call it between 5,000 and 6,000 students at the Flanagan Campus. Providence is our next largest with a couple thousand students, and then Newport is our smallest campus. And yes, in terms of availability, because Warwick is the largest campus, it offers the largest number of courses. There's a significant percentage of evening courses at the Warwick campus in particular. That is also true in Lincoln and in Providence. It's somewhat less true in Newport, and I think an area where we intend and want to grow is really offering richer offerings on the weekend. So we do have some, we want to do more.
I guess getting back to the Rhode Island Promise, because that's the golden egg that we want to have those individuals graduate within the 2 years, and is obviously the requirement of 15 credits per semester, and we want to make sure that they either come out with a associate degree that's funneled or related towards the job skill that they want to enter into, or go into a four-year college. I guess the question becomes where it becomes so important on guidance counselors, and what type of role, can you expound on their role and ensuring that the student, once he gets there and decides on a particular major, how we step them through that process of taking those courses that, number one, would make them eligible for a job if that's what they choose after 2 years, or number two, to follow in the direction of Senator DePalma's question earlier to Rick, to formulate a partnership with Rick or URI to not lose any credits as they move forward.
So thank you, Senator. And just before I move to your question about advising, I want to return one more time to your observation of, you need 30 credits after your first year and a 2.5 GPA in order to be eligible for the second year. I think one of the most important interventions that we have put into place to make that 30 credit bar, which is a steep bar for our Rhode Island Promise students. We're a year-round college. That wasn't true 5 years ago in any meaningful way. We have a robust winter session. We have a very robust summer session where we're serving, our goal is to serve 5,000 or 6,000 or 7,000 students in the summer. For our Rhode Island Promise students, that year-round and those shoulder offerings are absolutely essential. So I know I have one of my students is a Promise student. He didn't have, like many first generation, first semester students, he had a rough time, and he had a rough time mostly because he was going to college in his bedroom. He absolutely needs winter and summer to get back on track to be competitive for the fall. So I wanted just to come back to that one more time. And now to your, what I heard you ask, which is, what is our intention and how do we think about our workforce with supporting our students to effectively be on a pathway to graduate on time and transfer seamlessly to RIC, URI, or another four-year institution, or into a quality first job, and ideally, in my opinion, both, because that's the majority of our students. They'll be working and going to a four-year school. I'll offer, I think, just 3 areas that we have really focused on. First, it's called Guided Pathways. It's a well-known mechanism in sort of leading community colleges all over the country. We won our first ever Title III grant 2 years ago, $1.3 million, to take that structure and bring it into CCRI. Very simply, this is what it looks like. Prior to Guided Pathways, the way a student experienced our college was something like a cafeteria style offering. So a student would walk into CCRI, there would be this enormous richness of offerings, but very complicated to map and very complicated to understand how you create your own pathway through. And we know that that cafeteria style had a negative impact on how our students were actually able to earn a certificate or degree in a timely manner. So the purpose of Guided Pathways is to welcome a student into the college, immediately enroll the student in the first semester into one or more classes that are in their field of chosen study. So we have 7 at the college. They cover everything you could think of, whether you want to be an engineer or a teacher or a policeman or a healthcare provider. There's a pathway for you. So we get them right into a pathway. Their very first semester, they get to test whether they've got it right. Did they like their first engineering course? Do they think they want to stay on that path? So the sooner we can help our students understand what the right pathway is for them, we know from looking at national data, the more likely they are to persist. So that's number one, these very clear pathways with very clear course offerings that lead in a way that our students can read and track how to get to a certificate or degree. To your second point, sort of what does our advising system look like? We didn't used to have dedicated advisors. And when I think about Senator Cano's earlier comments, and one of my ongoing and pressing concerns, we need strong state support in order to invest in our advising model. You know, when I think about a community college, absolutely our faculty are at the heart of what we do. But for community college students, we need them to have that wraparound advising support so they can learn how to be an effective community college student. So we now have, for every new incoming student, they are assigned a dedicated advisor. Makes an enormous difference, so that when you're brand new and you're still trying to figure out where your classroom is, you don't have to bounce around from advisor to advisor who really has perhaps very little knowledge of who you are, what your strengths are, and what you want to do. So we're building these cohorted model so that our advisors get to know their cohorts and really get a sense of them throughout. Now, and then finally, as we look at the federal relief dollars, you know, I think one intervention I hope we will be able to put into play based on guidelines is set it up as a grant funded position and really invest in an intense way into even more advisors. We don't have nearly enough advisors. I've been talking about that every single year when I come in front of this committee. And what is my aspiration? I hope that we can prove to the state as it considers future appropriations that investing in those advisors results in increased retention and increased successful outcomes. So I think the two things that I would highlight would be this concept of dedicated advisors and guided pathways, which are designed to help make it easier to decode what it is to be in college.
Thank you. And one of my last comment is relative to certain disciplines. And it's not only true of CCRI, URI, and maybe even RIC colleges, is that when an individual chooses a particular field, let's say nursing, for instance, that even though they probably don't realize it, but it becomes a very competitive field. And after that year, maybe at CCRI, or after a year or 2 years at URI, then they find out that they can't continue that path because their GPA was a 3.1 rather than a 3.3, or whatever the cutoff is. And to me, it just seems wrong that we lead someone on that pathway and they're doing well. You know, you mentioned a 2.5, but they're getting a 3.0 or a 3.1, but they're not able to move forward because it hasn't turned that 3.3 grade. What do you say to that? Or how do we expand that? Or how do we approach that? Or what's the solution?
Sure. I appreciate the question so much, and you are correct. My office hears regularly from students that have come to CCRI with the aspiration of being accepted into our nursing program. And they go through the prerequisites, and then they find that they are not admitted to the program, which, as you clearly are indicating, you realize it is, you know, there is an objective system that is based on testing and GPA. And in fact, it won't surprise you that GPA is well above the GPA you even mentioned. So we're talking about GPAs that are north of 3.7, 3.8, and 3.9. And so I'll offer this I don't have all the answers to what you're outlining. I think that's sort of a broad collective impact, talking about healthcare more broadly across the state. But I can offer this. Number one, I spoke earlier about this guided pathways model, and we have a healthcare pathway. And what that means is, and my sister's a nurse, so nurses are important. We should value them. We should invest in them. Also, In Rhode Island, we need many other kinds of workers in the healthcare profession. Those are also good paying careers. And I think what the pathway has done for us is show our students that if they arrive at CCRI aspiring to be accepted as a nursing student, there are all these other options within our healthcare pathway that provide really meaningful socioeconomic opportunity for themselves and their families. And I'll give you just one example because it stays with me, and it covers almost everything you and I have been talking about. It's a first generation student of color who arrived in our first class of promise students and who found his way through sheer intelligence and grit into our healthcare pathway. He earned his associate's degree while working 2 jobs, one at the college, the other delivering pizza, went on, earned the degree in radiography, and is about to be President Sanchez's graduate with a 4-year degree in BSN, and while working full-time at Lifespan. So figuring out how we make that kind of possibility much better and more broadly understood to our students, I think is going to be important. And then finally, I think all the time about how we create ladders for all Rhode Islanders. I am personally really focused and prioritize diversifying the healthcare workforce, particularly in high-paying jobs. And one of the interventions that we are putting into play is thinking about, we train so many CNAs, and CNAs are critical to the state of Rhode Island. We know what that workforce looks like, and we now are creating a pathway that will provide for CNAs to then have an entryway into that healthcare pathway, and with that aspiration for them to go on and build careers like the one I just shared, and for many of them into the nursing pathway. So we've got work to do there. And I look forward to partnering with our 4-year partners and with our healthcare providers in the state to meet what you're talking about.
No,
Thanks so much.
That's a good point, that we need to have that healthcare pathway for those individuals. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Senator Flanagan. President Hughes, Senator Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the interest of time, I'll limit the questions to just a few quick ones. President, good to see you again, even virtually. Thanks for all you do. We're fortunate to have you leading the Community College of Rhode Island. It's good to hear about structured pathways. Bring me back to my CCA days and other things that you've done to ensure students graduate on time, etc. And as I've said before, if nothing else, Rhode Island Promises really transformed CCRI, because what you did for and because of Promise students, all students at CCRI benefited. So at the end of the day, categorically, the initiation of Rhode Island Promise benefited all students at CCRI, hands down. And I wouldn't have expected the numbers to be the same in any college this year, given the pandemic, but that's neither here nor there. With regards to the two things, as it relates to the transfer process, you heard me ask the specific question, pointed questions at President Sanchez. How often do you measure it? What measures do you have? What metrics do you have so that, as Senator Flanagan indicated, somebody's in a CNA program or nursing program at CCRI, 2 years, Sally or Joe, we want them to go to RIC or URI, and all the credits they have, they all transfer and they start exactly where they should, and there's not a, no, it's not quite right. So can you just talk briefly about that?
Absolutely.
How you measure the measures, the metrics for that?
Yes, and of course we'll follow up with additional detail both to this and to the committee. I already spent some time with Senator Flanagan talking about the pathways, and so I won't go back through that. I do want to observe just two things, Senator. First, as the president of CCRI, what we first have to get right is what takes place inside our walls, right? So we had a lot of design work to do. The guided pathways, I think, is at the very core of that work. So one of the intended outcomes of guided pathways is that students aren't wasting time, they're not wasting credits, they're not wasting money, and we're setting them up to, in a much more efficient way, transfer to our four-year partners. Second, as I think the commissioner outlined earlier this evening, that is a partnership. We can't do that by ourselves. So, we would love to, but CCRI cannot build those pathways by ourselves. We must do that, as you acknowledge, with our four-year partners. We look forward, with the commissioner being seated, to working closely with his office to help sort of coordinate that work. And I know that President Sanchez and I are aligned. We share, and President Dooley, the importance of designing the kind of pathways you're describing. We know if we look around the United States, you probably know the examples: Arizona, Florida, Virginia. We know how it can be done. You very simply outlined it. And if other states can figure it out, certainly we can. Here are the numbers I have right now for you, that are simply about what transfer numbers look like from CCRI to both RIC and URI over the last several years. So if you could permit me, and sort of broad brush, what I would want to share with this committee is, in general, and true at higher ed institutions across the country with very few exceptions, we are seeing, or we have historically seen, consistent enrollment declines. And so if there had been, as I think there has been some concern voiced, that Rhode Island Promise has not made a meaningful impact on that positive transfer number, we would therefore see the number of students transferring going down. It's simple math. In fact, that's not the case. So even as enrollment overall at CCRI has declined slightly, the transfer numbers have gone up. And so I'll share just what we have, and again, happily follow up with the committee with our data, and I'm sure the other two presidents will. If we look back at the year 2017, we saw just over 1,450 students transfer to a four-year school. To either RIC or URI. So I'm just going to focus on those two schools because that's what we can, as a state, really control and manage. So 1,458 in 2017. RIC is historically our largest transfer partner. So in that year, we transferred 758 students to RIC and 700 to URI. And forgive me because for some reason, I'm going to jump ahead. And again, we'll fill in the gaps. Let's just look at the most recent graduating class. So last year, because that's what I have the data. So we went from 1,458 in 2017 to 3 years later, 1,543. Okay, so roughly 100 student increase. And our overall enrollment was down north of 1,500 students. So enrollment's gone down, and yet we're transferring more students. That number, last year, we went from 758 to RIC in 2017 to 783 to RIC in 2020. We went from 700 to URI in 2017 to 760 to URI in 2020. Now, I share what I heard. I heard Senator Acosta say it earlier. Certainly Commissioner Gilkey showed the data that we all know very well about lifetime earnings and the difference a bachelor's degree makes. We are passionately committed to supporting many more of our students into the four-year space and want to work with you and with our four-year colleagues to make that happen.
Thank you, Senator DePalma. Senator Paolino.
Sorry, go ahead. Never mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, President Hughes, for being here. So I just want to go back to a comment that you mentioned before, stating that you hope to see that one day the General Assembly will recognize the value in investing in higher education. And I believe that we do, but we want to see, or at least I want to see, results. And so I was just wondering if you could shed some light on the current graduation rates at CCRI.
Sure, and Senator, my heartfelt apologies if what you heard from my comment was that what I tried to communicate was certainly the legislature's strong support for CCRI and making sure that we continue to receive that strong support. So if my words suggested otherwise, that was not my intent. Simply trying to encourage the legislature to continue to support our students. So again, please accept my apologies if you heard something I didn't intend. In terms of graduation rates, I'd be happy at the end of August is when we report those federal numbers for this year's graduating class. What we know about last year's graduating class, I can share both the 2-year and the 3-year rate with you. We had an 18% 2-year rate. So to give you a sense of what that looks like set against national norms, it's well above the national 2-year rate of about 14%. To give you further sort of just description of the progress that's underway at the college, 5 years ago, we were hovering around a 4 or 5% graduation rate. So if you've heard me say it before, you're never going to see me celebrating an 18% graduation rate. It's not nearly good enough. And again, just to clarify for those that maybe aren't looking at higher education data every day, every hour, that 18% does not mean we only graduate 18% of our students. It's a cohort that is measured by a federal data body, and it only counts those students that are enrolling in college for the very first time and who are enrolling full time, and what that graduation rate looks like. So again, we have success rates in terms of either graduation or transfer close to 60%. So that's the 2-year rate. In the community college space, Senator, the 3-year rate is an increasingly important one based on the work that our students require when they arrive to us. We celebrated, we had a 30% graduation rate, 3-year graduation rate last year. To give you a sense of context, that puts us at the very top in New England and well above the national average. Again, to put it in context, 5 years ago, we were at 15%. So both our 2-year and our 3-year rates 5 years ago were well below the national average. We're now well above, and again, I would want to just close with 2 things. I don't think either one of those outcomes is nearly good enough, and we're going to work hard with you and with our K through 12 partners to continue to improve that. I am really heartened by the progress that our faculty and staff and everyone at the college has made, and of course our students in that kind of rapid improvement.
Great. Thank you so much.
That is encouraging to hear. I do remember asking a similar question probably around 5 years ago or 4 years ago and getting that numbers from you. So I do like to see the improvement. I hope to continue to see that to rise all the way up to 100% if possible. And one final question. You mentioned the CNA program. I'm just curious on graduations, also maybe 2-year, 3-year, if you can provide that as well.
So with your permission, allow me to come back. I do not have that at my fingertips, but my office will follow up and get it right to you.
Great. Thank you
very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, President Hughes. That does appear to sort of conclude our questions for President Hughes. I want to thank you for being here this evening, to you and your team, and the same remarks that I made to President Sanchez around, especially in the last year. Really adapting and continuing to help serve students across. We just want to say thank you for their efforts, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We are next going to go turn to the University of, actually before I do that, Senator Murray, I believe that you may want to be recorded in the affirmative on 5016 and in opposition on 5586.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So ordered. We will next move to the University of Rhode Island. I believe we have President Dooley with us this evening. President Dooley, I want to welcome you to the Senate Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll just note for the record that I don't think they pay you enough to be up this late in the Senate.
They certainly don't, and we'll appreciate your op-ed in the next Providence Journal.
I'll get that out as soon as I can, sir. I also want to thank my colleagues, Presidents Frank Sanchez and Meghan Hughes, for their very kind and perhaps over-generous remarks in thanking me for our partnership. It's been great to work with the two of them for several years, and I look forward to their their continued leadership and success here in Rhode Island as my wife and I move westward in the relatively near future. It's late. What I'll try to do is perhaps give you some things in my remarks that perhaps will answer some questions similar to those that have been asked of President Sanchez and Hughes, and try to keep my remarks as brief as possible. With regard to the pandemic, you've heard a lot about that. URI managed very, very well through the pandemic, and frankly, you and your colleagues in the House, as well as 3 different governors, deserve a lot of credit for that, and I'll explain that in a second. But we did not lay off people. I think we had 2 layoffs through the pandemic. We had some restructuring. We kept our workforce intact through the pandemic, and we were able to do that despite the fact that at the end of the day, it appears that our net loss to this point through the pandemic was about $22 million. And you might ask the question, how did you do so well with that kind of financial loss? And the answer is, thanks to your support, the support of, I said, multiple governors, and very, very hard work at the University of Rhode Island. Since about 2010, we have built significant reserve funds just for an emergency such as COVID-19, both in our auxiliary operations as well as in our general funds. Those reserve funds allowed us to buffer even in before the federal relief funds showed up, and keep our workforce intact, keep our classes running, keep enrollment high, while providing everything that our students needed to do the best they could, and they did very, very well through this pandemic. So I want to thank you for that. It was a lot of work over a number of years to build those reserves. With the federal stimulus, we're estimating that at the conclusion of the final round of stimulus and recovery payments, we'll be able to replenish those reserves to about 80 to 90% of where they were pre-COVID. And that will, I think, position us very, very well for the future. We're looking very good for next year. We had another record in applications, over 25,000 applications. We have a very strong fresh entering class that hit all of our targets. And we're now working very hard to ensure that class shows up in the fall. So we're very, very optimistic about the future, given the success that we've had over the past few years, even with COVID, in recruiting and retaining students. The comments made earlier about state appropriations as a percentage of cost of education hold very true for the University of Rhode Island. The governor's recommended for FY22 is about $81.5 million. Assuming that all of that comes to URI, that will be a state appropriation still a few $1 million less than what URI had in 2008 from the state. So over a decade and a half of cost increases, inflation, and growth, and our state appropriation is still not equal to what it was in 2008. How have we managed then to be as successful as we have? And the primary reason for that simply is we went out and focused on students. Our retention numbers have grown, our graduation rates have dramatically increased, and enrollment has dramatically increased, and all of that translates into additional revenue for the University of Rhode Island. Our most recent numbers is our 4-year graduation rate is now at 58%, closing in on 60. A decade ago, that number was much, much less than 50%. I think it was around 35 or 40%. Our 6-year graduation rate is now 70%. Our retention rate from first year to second year is now 86%, which is the highest in University of Rhode Island history, where we've been taking those numbers. In terms of degree attainment, I think it's worth noting that over the last decade, by virtue of better retention, graduation, and recruitment, and enrollment growth, the University of Rhode Island has awarded 10,000 more degrees over the last 10 years than it would have awarded if we had just kept doing business the way we were doing business in 2009 and 10. That's 10,000 additional degrees over where we were a decade ago in terms of productivity. And those people, many of them, are working in Rhode Island and being very successful. So I think that's a strong measure of the Universities of Rhode Island's focus on student success and the quality of the students and the quality of the faculty that we've been able to attract to the university. We've added, noting, as Professor Hughes did, the 130,000 Rhode Islanders who have some college credit and no college degree. Several years ago, we created Finish What You Started. That's now graduated several hundred students, and these are students who are coming back to URI who have college credits from anywhere. And with a combination of prior learning assessment and I think very close advising, hands-on advising and close mentoring of students, those students are able to return to the University of Rhode Island sometimes years after they took their last college credit and graduate with a degree in a timely way. We're very, very proud of the success that we've had with Finish What You've Started. With regard to the budget, as I said, the budget that the governor recommended, although less than what was requested, we think will serve us well. I know the question came up earlier about the timing of the allocation. I believe the answer is as follows. At the end of the last fiscal year, our 21 allocation was reduced in the last month, in fact, the last few weeks before the end of the fiscal year, by about $6.5 million. And that has not been recovered or provided, that has not been replaced until the governor's recommended budget this year. So essentially the FY22 governor's recommendation will replace that FY21 reduction in our agreed upon allocation and take us, as I said, still back to a level that was below our funding in 2008, 2009. We think we can get by with that budget quite well. Again, enrollment looks strong, and that means tuition revenues will be strong for the University of Rhode Island as well. One thing I will mention about that, our tuition, we monitor our tuition very, very carefully. It's extremely competitive. In fact, if you want to go to a research university from Virginia to Maine, outside of your home state, the University of Rhode Island is your best deal in terms of tuition. Also, national IPEDS data, the national database, indicates that the University of Rhode Island is, by a substantial margin, the most efficient public research university in the mid-Atlantic and northeastern United States in terms of how much money it costs per credit hour taught. So we try to be very, very efficient, and we try to be extremely sensitive to the marketplace about where to price our tuition, and that has been very successful to us in recruiting and retaining students. We have dramatically increased financial aid over the last several years, and that has been an important part of our strategy. As revenues increase, so do financial aid. We now award about $100 million in financial aid generated ourselves to students at URI on an annual basis. That's one thing I would mention about the budget. The area that we are seeking further consideration over time from the governor and from the General Assembly is in regard to the RYCAP allocation for asset protection. The University of Rhode Island has between 25 and 30% of the total square footage of the state. The governor's recommended allocation for asset protection is $9.9 million. That's a huge increase over the COVID level of about $2 million. But that's still about $5 or $6, $8 million perhaps short of what we would need on an annual basis to, by anything objective analysis, adequately maintain the space that we have. So we'll be asking for consideration going forward for increasing over time the asset protection from RYCAP that URI receives. Just a couple of other remarks about the budget. One, we certainly would be strongly supportive of continuing to fund what is known in the vernacular around the State House and amongst many of us as Rhode Island Promise 1.0, which is the the Rhode Island Scholarship Program that goes to Rhode Islanders to attend a Rhode Island institution. URI gets about $2.6 million from that annually. It's a very important source of financial aid for our students. And last year, over 3,200 Rhode Island students benefited from that allocation provided in that program, and we would certainly like to see that maintained. I'm also pleased to say that one of the things that's accompanied our enrollment growth over the last few years has been significant increases in diversity. We are about at a level now where about 25% of our student body self-identify as students of color. A significant fraction of those are Latinx or Hispanic. And in fact, in 2020, we had over 1,700 students who identified that way compared to 940 in 2010. That has been a major goal of the institution, to diversify the student body and the faculty and staff of the institution, and we've worked very hard at it and had seen some very strong growth in those areas over the last few years. And we'll continue to work on that. Just another couple of remarks related to some of the questions, and then I'll conclude with a short discussion of the Small Business Development Center. That is this. When we admit a student at the University of Rhode Island to nursing or pharmacy, they are admitted, period, for the entire 4 or 6 years of that program. There's no hurdle to get over once admitted. They can change their mind. They can leave URI. They can fail their classes. But short of that, once admitted to nursing and pharmacy at the University of Rhode Island, you're in the program for 4 to 6 years until you complete your degree. So there's no additional hurdles, grade point averages to be maintained or got over, as long as you continue to succeed in your courses, pass them, and be in a position to move on to the next year's courses. So that's an important point of pride for us, because we're able to tell students who want to come to the University of Rhode Island in pharmacy to get a PharmD degree, a 6-year degree, or a Bachelor of Nursing 4-year degree, that if they're admitted to those colleges, they will complete that degree, and it's entirely up to them. But there's no additional hurdles for them to overcome. And that's been, frankly, very helpful to us in recruiting extremely high-quality students, both into nursing and to pharmacy at the University of Rhode Island. The final thing I will just mention to you is, coming out of COVID, we believe that the work that the University of Rhode Island Small Business Development Center does will be extremely important in recovering helping the economy recover, particularly for small businesses. Right now, thanks to, again, your strong support over the years, the state allocation to that center is up to $350,000. We believe we can make a very, very strong case for COVID economic recovery if that could be increased over time to double that to $700,000. That would be matched by the federal Small Business Administration. It will be put to very, very good use in Rhode Island on behalf of small businesses. We've had tremendous success there over the last several years in growing the number of businesses impacted and their success, and the amount of capital that they've been able to raise to sustain and grow their businesses. So that is a request that we've been discussing with your colleagues in the House and with the governor, and we would hope that you would consider it here in the Senate as well. I'll conclude my remarks, Mr. Chairman, and of course be happy to take any questions that any member of the committee may have.
Thank you so much, President Dooley. We appreciate those insights, and same as I mentioned to the presidents, all of the work over the last year, especially during COVID. Are there questions or comments from members of the committee? Senator Palmer?
Thank you, Chairman. President Dooley, good to see you again. Again, virtually the same question I asked the other folks, the other presidents, not necessarily tonight, but with regards to how do you measure the matriculation or the transfer, transfer from CCRI? How do you ensure the nursing program, if that's the one we'll call nursing, whatever it is, not CNA, the nursing program, that if I'm at CCRI and I finish 2 years, I come to URI and I'm starting my junior year and having not skipped a beat. How do you track that? And if you don't, do you plan to track it?
We track that very closely. We have, through a number of mechanisms, we have the joint admissions agreement, which students who enter CCRI can enroll in, and that means that if they take 60 credits at CCRI, they're guaranteed seamless transfer to the University of Rhode Island under the terms of the joint admissions agreement. Our own counselors and advisors spend many hours at CCRI in person, meeting in small groups and individually with CCRI students interested in transfer to URI. That's an important, I think, investment of time and resources on URI's part. We don't rely simply on virtual tools. We actually go up there and meet with CCRI students who've expressed an interest in transfer to URI in person multiple times to help guide them through their 2 years or 1 year or 3 years at CCRI to enable a smooth transfer to the University of Rhode Island. We work closely with the CCRI faculty in particular to make sure that courses that will be important in a transfer program are coordinated well with expectations at URI, so that the student who completes, say, a calculus course at the CCRI knows that that particular calculus course will be sufficient for them to enter engineering when they arrive at URI as a junior, for example. Those are some of the things that we do. We are by no means completely satisfied with this as yet. We'll be working very closely with Meghan's team. We respect them a great deal and the work that they do there, and they've been great partners. So we anticipate further growth in success of transfer students, and frankly, we would like to see even more CCRI students transfer to URI.
President, thank you very much. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Palma. Are there additional questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay. President Dooley, I wanted to say on behalf of I'm sure I can say on behalf of the entire Senate, I want to thank you for your 12 years of leadership at URI. I know in that time period we've just seen a tremendous transformation and growth at the university that I think we all can be proud of with URI serving as our flagship. And I know it's certainly not without a lot of effort and a lot of long hours. And I do see that actually Senator Cano has a question, so let me interrupt Senator Cano.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say thank you to the President, and I concur with your comments that you were doing. I just want to be consistent with the same question that I asked both of President Sanchez and President Hughes in regards to the appropriation of the dollars. You did make a little comment in regards to that, but I'll ask the same thing. If the General Assembly doesn't appropriate the request that you asked the governor's office, would you foresee layoffs and would tuition would go up?
Difficult. It would very much depend upon, obviously, the magnitude, Senator, of any reduction below the governor's recommended allocation. We would do a number of things typically when we're faced with shortfalls in state appropriation. One of the things we don't do is we don't dramatically increase tuition. We have kept tuition increases at about 2 to 2.5% per year for the last several years, because we know that that's what families and students tell us they want. They want a predictable tuition increase that they can plan on in advance, as opposed to significant fluctuations in tuition increases from year to year. So we've always strived to keep our tuition increases relatively modest. We have gotten, Senator, basically the answer to your question, we have gotten extremely good at reallocation. Every year we reallocate within the university literally millions and millions of dollars in order to maintain quality of our programs by making reductions where we think we can afford to make reductions in ways that do not impact the student experience, student success, the availability of courses and opportunities for students. So that's been, in a certain sense, the magic bullet for us in a way, has been a very sophisticated budget process that allows for annual reallocation so that we can move money around to where it's really needed. And we think with the governor's recommended budget, we'll be in very good place, particularly given the early indications on enrollment. But of course, should enrollment not meet our targets or the state not being able to meet the governor's recommended budget, we will have to make reductions. But we will do so very strategically in areas that do not impact student success.
Thank you, President, for answering the question. I just wanted to make sure that I was consistent with the three presidents, and also I just want to say, good luck in your future endeavors, and thank you for the service to the state.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Senator Sosnowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to briefly say, first of all, thank you, President Dooley, for your presentation this evening. It's amazing to me over the years that you've been at URI to give a presentation at this hour, to be so on the ball. You just always have done a consistently great job for URI, and wish you the very, very best. I think back to 12 years ago, all the accomplishments that you have accomplished at URI is just outstanding. It's been great to work with you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate that. As you know, and as my colleagues have said, it's really very much a team, all hands on deck effort, particularly during COVID. And the faculty at URI are just an outstanding faculty. And I have to say the staff at URI are amongst the best I've ever seen. And our students did remarkably well through this pandemic. They really came through for us and came through for each other and managed to really succeed despite all of the challenges that COVID-19 and all the consequences of that threw at them. And I'm very proud of our students. And if any of you are bored, I will tell you that commencement is this week on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in our football stadium with social distancing. We're doing 3 commencements a day, each college plus the graduate school. You'd be welcome to join us, any of you, on the platform and celebrate with us. The students are so excited to be able to have an in-person ceremony this year and graduate. So we're looking forward to that as well.
Great job.
Great. Thank you, Senator Sosnowski. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay. Hearing none, President Dooley, I just want to kind of continue where I was going there and just once again to say thank you for your efforts over the last 12 years. I certainly, we've always been so proud of URI, but continue to be proud of the institution. You have been a great host to the Senate the many times that we've visited and have enjoyed the time that we've been able to be down there with you. And as you're going back to Montana, the only thing I know in Montana is Big Sky, one of my favorite places to hang out in certain months of the year anyway. I just want to wish the best to you and your wife, Lynn, as you head back to Montana, where I know you have a lot of family as well.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. That does conclude the presentations from the institutions. We do have several individuals who have signed up to testify on these items. The first is Dr. Thomas I'm going to probably butcher the name, Schmeling, with the American Federation of Teachers Committee on Political Education. Doctor, welcome to Senate Finance.
Thank you, Chairman Pearson, and thank you, members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak to you tonight about the higher education budget as it affects Rhode Island College. As I think it was said, my name is Tom Schmeling. I'm a member of the political science faculty at RIC and chair of the RIC AFT Committee on Political Education. And I'm here this evening to urge you to increase the fiscal year 22 general revenue budget appropriation as proposed in the governor's budget by the $5.9 million to meet the college's request. This funding is essential if RIC is to continue to meet the contractual obligations, avoid further layoffs, and begin to fill the vacancies in the faculty and staff that have been created by the recent budget shortfalls, and to continue to provide Rhode Islanders with access to an affordable, high-quality four-year college degree. The governor's proposal forces RIC to close that $5.9 million gap by once again raising tuition on our students. And as I think was mentioned before, in the year 2000, the legislative appropriations covered 60% of the cost of RIC education, and today it's 40%, and the students pay the 60%. And in real dollars, inflation-adjusted dollars, the state appropriation is actually lower than it was 20 years ago, with the consequence that college education is increasingly out of reach for Rhode Islanders, especially for the first-generation college students that Rick has traditionally served. As I think was also mentioned, Rhode Island ranks near the bottom of states in its support for public higher education. The most recent reports from the State Higher Education Officers Organization puts Rhode Island 47th in the percent of revenue allocated to higher education and 45th in support per capita. So without adequately funding public higher education, Rhode Islanders cannot compete in the national economy where more and more jobs require a college degree. I urge you to provide Rhode Island College with an appropriation that is adequate for us to do our job of educating Rhode Islanders for a 21st century economy. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Hearing none, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for giving us your testimony.
Thank you.
Next testify is going to be James Parisi with Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals. Jim, welcome to Senate Finance.
Chairman, thank you very much, and thank you and your committee members for your detailed overview of agency budgets, including the budgets every year. Appreciate it. The Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals urges you to increase the general revenue funding for RIC by the $5.9 million that they had requested. We represent three different groups of workers at RIC: the faculty, the professional staff, and the adjunct faculty. And it's on their collective behalf that I urge you to increase funding for RIC. My members have witnessed firsthand RIC operating under an austerity budget. The adjunct faculty reductions over the last 2 years have been significant. The load hours, when you count up 3 credit hour and 4 credit hour courses, the load hours have decreased for adjunct faculty 21% over the last 2 years, and there's 76 less adjunct faculty working now than there were 2 years ago. The professional staff witnessed 7 layoffs last fall, including positions in the labs and data management and construction, and there are 3 pending this year. And the faculty are going to lose 20 teaching members when the Henry Barnard School ceases to be a state institution as the school transforms into a division of Providence Country Day School. And we know that adding money was not going to save those jobs. We're painfully aware that $5.9 million is not going to bring Henry Barnard back, but we think it's really important that the state invest in Rhode Island College in the long term. And that's why we urge you not to rely on the federal money available that's only of a short duration, but we are looking for long-term commitment to fund RIC at appropriate levels, and that's why we want you to increase general revenue funding of RIC by the $5.9 million. There's been some reference to contracts. The faculty had highlighted how low RIC faculty were paid compared to other peer institutions, and they bargained a contract that raised pay with the post-secondary council, and unfortunately those raises weren't funded by subsequent governor budgets, even though the administration was part of that conversation. Comments have already been made about the level of funding and tuition issue. I just want to note for the record that the tuition hike this year is 5%, and adding $5.9 million isn't going to impact that, but it is necessary to increase funding for RIC, so in the long term, they're not doing those large tuition increases, something that President Dooley just said they avoided at URI. And finally, we want to address the student debt crisis in a real and tangible way. And the way that all of you can address the student debt crisis is by increasing state funding for RIC, so in the long term there aren't these tuition hikes that make it so hard for students to complete college on the time frame that they had endeavored. I appreciate your attention. If there are any questions, I'd try to answer them.
Thanks so much, Jim. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Hearing none, Jim, thanks so much for sticking with us and for testifying this evening.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Next testify is going to be Dr. Michaela Mariel Lemonick Arthur, representing Rhode Island College, AFT, 1819. Doctor, welcome to Senate Finance.
Hi, thank you for having me speak to you this evening. I'm Dr. Michaela Arthur, Chair of Sociology at RIC, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Rhode Island College American Federation of Teachers Executive Committee to advocate for an increase in funding for Rhode Island College. I have provided some written testimony with more detail on my comments tonight. Research clearly shows that funding public higher education is one of the best investments that states can make. People with a college degree are healthier, live longer, are more likely to be employed, earn more, and are more engaged in civic activities like voting. And a new report that came out just today showed that increased investment of general revenues dollars in higher education is associated with increased student success across the higher education sphere. While all investments in public higher education are good investments, an investment in Rhode Island College is best of all. This is true for two main reasons. First, bachelor's degrees have a bigger payoff for both individuals and communities, as the commissioner showed earlier this evening. And students who begin at four-year colleges are far more likely to earn a bachelor's degree. And second, Rhode Island College is the only four-year college in our state where the vast majority of students are Rhode Islanders. Thus, an investment in Rhode Island College is an investment in people who will stay here and help build our future. Our nurses, our teachers, our police officers, our accountants, our artists, our social workers, our addiction counselors, our actors, and indeed our elected officials. An increase of $5.9 million over the governor's proposed budget is necessary for the college to be able to provide the excellent education that will prepare Rhode Islanders to fill the jobs of tomorrow and to do the work of sustaining our communities. This funding would allow us to reverse some of the layoffs that have reduced our ability to serve our students well. It would ensure the college could meet contractual commitments the state of Rhode Island entered into, but which were never funded. It would ensure that we can invest in the technology and personnel necessary to support high-demand, high-wage academic programs like nursing and computer science. Your investment will make the difference. As a professor and department chair, I work with students every day who are shining examples of what a Rhode Island college education can do. Take the student who just graduated this spring after coming to college unsure of what her future path might hold and low in confidence about her academic abilities. A student who is the first in her family to earn a bachelor's degree and who got a job offer well before graduation to work in a research position for a medical data informatics company. Take the student who nearly quit college but is now the director of programs for a local nonprofit while finishing her master's degree. Take the student who graduated shortly after having her first child and is now a human resources director, or the first-generation student earning his PhD, or so many of your excellent colleagues in the legislature and other parts of government. Rhode Island College is the engine of opportunity for Rhode Islanders and for our state's future, and an investment in Rhode Island College is an investment in building stronger communities and a more robust economy for all of us. I know the task before you is challenging as you seek to balance the many priorities that all merit investment, but I ask that you keep Rhode Island College's needs at the top of that list of priorities. I ask this because I know that your investment in our students is an investment that will pay off. It is an investment in tomorrow. It is the kind of investment our entire state can benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay. Hearing none, thank you so much for your testimony this evening.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Dennis Hilliard with the State Crime Lab. Dennis, are you with us?
I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for allowing me to talk. I thought I was on a list, and I guess I wasn't on a list, but now I'm back on a list. So I'm happy to talk to you tonight. I can tell you that our FY21 budget has not been cut, and we haven't lost any people in our laboratory. We've been consistently working within the laboratory through COVID. Some of my people have to work remotely, but many of them have to work in the laboratory because that's where the work gets done. What I'm bringing to your attention tonight is something that we need to address in our laboratory, which I reported to my State Crime Laboratory Commissioner at the last meeting in April. And what we saw was an uptick in gun crimes coming into the laboratory. Now, remember, our FY 2022 budget is figured out in August of last year, 2020. And at that time, we did see a slight increase, but we figured it was because of COVID. We actually shut down taking cases in for a while until we could create a safe space to receive evidence in. And for a short period of time, we were receiving evidence in our parking lot during the summer months. But we created this new space within the university to collect evidence safely. And the numbers did not go down. We thought maybe August and September we saw a spike, but then we saw it continue. So what I recommended to my commission in April was to hire another examiner. Of course, the cost for that exam is not in the FY 2022 budget as presented to the governor. And that 2022 budget basically was based upon the continuation of the current status of the laboratory, which includes 10 full-time people, associated costs, and equipment. So what I'm bringing to you and what I've sent to you in my written testimony is a chart that basically shows the numbers, at least through March of this year. If I can share that with you, I will. Let's see if it pops up. So do you see the chart there that runs from June of 2019 forward?
We can.
Yes. Okay. So you see the big increase, and that's our overall increase. So we handle firearms as well as latent fingerprints and trace evidence. And then if we go to the next page, we just see the firearms. You can see that most of the cases are related to our firearms and NIBIN entries into the system. We know the province did a gun buyback at the end of last year. We saw increasing cases from them. But what we did see lately is an increase in firearms use. And if you were watching the news all of last weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, city and province, many more cases will be coming to our laboratory tomorrow. From one case, we're going to expect to see some 40 to 50 cartridge casings, spent cartridge casings, as well as maybe 8 or 9 guns delivered to the laboratory. So what I'm asking this committee to do, and what you can look at in my testimony, is to refer to the stories that show not only Rhode Island, but nationwide we're seeing this increase in gun violence. So what I'm asking this committee to do, as well as I testified before the House Finance Committee, is to add about $115,000 to our FY 2022 budget so we can hire a full-time firearms examiner, not only to reduce the backlog that we're seeing. We went from 0 cases in April of 2020 to over 280 cases in this April in firearms alone. This person that we would hire would help relieve the backlog, would increase our number of firearms examiners from 2 to 3, and then would also help with succession planning. Both of my examiners are in their 60s and probably retiring in the next few years or so. So if I can get back to where I was, unshare. How do I unshare? I can't get back. Let's get rid of that. All right. Yeah, let's see where I am. Okay. So, again, I'm just asking this committee to consider this. Now, I know many of you have testified many times before this committee in the past. I know there's some new members of the committee. I recognize that one member of the committee has some criminal justice background and interest in forensics. So this is what I need. And I don't come to you just frivolously. This is something we need to do. It's only going to get worse if we don't hire this person into the laboratory. And I would then invite any or all of you to come and see the laboratory, see what we've done over the last 40 years that I've been here, starting in 1980. Going from a 2-room laboratory down to a full-service laboratory in the basement of Fogarty Hall. So I need your help. I need your help. I need the help of the House Finance Committee. I need the help of the governor to add the money to this budget in order to hire this person in to take care of the cases that we have now and in the future. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have or any of your committee members may have at this time from me. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Dennis, for your testimony. Are there any questions or comments from members of the committee? Okay. Hearing none, Dennis, thank you so much. Look forward to having you be able to testify in person again soon.
Absolutely.
And thanks for bearing out with us this evening.
Thank you, Chairman. And then also I want to extend my thanks to Dr. Dooley. He's been a great president. He's the president that put us in the URI budget umbrella, and that's been very beneficial to us over the last 10 years or so that we've been in that budget. So, again, thank you to the committee members for your time and to Dr. Dooley for his efforts.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much, Dennis. That does conclude our hearing this evening. I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank all the individuals from our institutions for all your efforts and for spending the time with us this evening. With that, Senator Palmer makes a motion to adjourn, second by Senator Cano. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much, everyone. We're adjourned.